So no one will admit you're from Fargo, eh? Oh, are you rolling? All right, if you recall, we're going to pick back up just as I promised. We were in this make-believe court petitioning for a possible name change regarding the mappings we'd done in the past, pointing out that three forces are actually necessary to run a three-dimensional universe, in spite of the fact that from some ordinary levels it would appear to be otherwise. But we have been through some of this before, and we have called them by such operational names as, well, it's just a C, D, and E force, and then even got a little more specific, and just fortuitously, we're able to come up with the fact that we call the C force constructive or change. It's always going on that kind of push. And then the D force like destructive, or at least resistive, like the status quo of. And then the E change, we did have to push the limits of words a little bit, and we called it the irrelevant. But it's like the non-aligned, it's like the non-involved force, it's like the pool of whatever would be possible at any particular moment, taking away, if you could see, any push trying to change and any push trying to resist. Then whatever else was left would be the E force. All right. If you recall where we were, as I was trying to get you to consider different ways of looking at it, since none of them, including the ones I just mentioned, are infinite, because they're having to do with finite energy. They're having to do with that taking place within a closet. And the closet does not have a dynamo. There is no Hoover Dam in your closet. A three-dimensional universe is not run from three-dimensional sources. But at any rate, I was trying to change the names a little bit, if you recall. And we'd already got through the first one, taking only 45 minutes. All of us being the speedy devils we are. And we'd gone through, and, well, also bring up that you recall we had, the renaming was, we were going to say we'd call the three forces, not name, the common, the what do you want, and hey, get out of here. And we also offered a B list for the common. You could call it the familiar, and we'd gone through pointing out that it is the happy home of habit. But the B list, or an alternative petition to this honorable court, if they will not change the names as I've just put forward, then we can come up with this alternative petition and consider naming them the expected force, or the, I could have guessed that. That's the first force, a common force. And the second one would be, we could call it the uninvited. The third force we could call the irrelevant and frightening. Now we're going to bravely, boldly, and with all due haste, push on to number 2. And based upon our roaring success time-wise in our previous meeting, I would assume that we'd get through 2 or 3 sentences regarding number 2 in the next 3 hours and 70 minutes left on the tape. But at any rate, now we're up, you with me, we're up to where we were, trying to hit number 2. That if we were going to call it the second force now, which calling it 1, 2, and 3 has no particular pertinence except ad hocly, that at any given moment you could, for the sake of making your own operational, subversive surveys, you could look at any operation, if you could see it in a certain way or in a situation, you could say, all right now what I see, speaking for you, because it matters not to anyone else. What a revolutionist can survey is his survey alone, and it has nothing to do with any sort of outside city, landmarks, property lines. So you must just see it. So if you see something in your own way, you might start picking out people. You might start picking out events. And to you at that moment, for ad hoc purposes for your survey, you might say, all right, that would represent, that would be what would be equal to the C force. This, within this confines of this situation which I am observing, then this person this group, this idea represents, within that confine, right now, represents a push to change. And over here, this person, that group, that institution, that idea, that attitude over here, right now, represents resistance. And, of course, if you're still at that level, then all you can do normally is say, all right, I'm aware of the fact that if you can see two, there are always three. And so everything that I did not just verbally, or at least mentally, limb to myself, that I did not note to myself, everything else is the irrelevant right this second. But there are other things. You know that. There's no denying. We're back to that kind of place that you can even get ordinary intelligence just for a second to say, well, you're right. In this situation, there's got to be three things going on. I can see, if we took a political situation, you can see that a progressive member of Parliament stands up and he speaks out for change. He is proposing some new law, and he says what we should do is change the way in which we handle the health care for this nation. And I say this would be the change. I know it is drastic, but it's needed and it's good, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, his fine peers there say, encourage him by hollering rubbish and, sit down, you silly twit. But at any rate, so in that one situation, you can observe and say, all right, he, in this situation, you're observing. You're sitting right there up in the gallery at the House of Parliament. And you say, all right, and there's no doubt you see him sitting on the right side. They still play all those things in well, the hell they do here. But anyway, on the right side, but the man speaking out for change. Whether you agree or not, what he's proposing, he admits. He said, this is drastic, and I know this goes against everything that we have done thus far along the lines of public national health, blah, blah, blah. Then another man stands up, and he says, nay, nay. And he stands up on the left or the right side of the seating, and, well, you already know he's going to be a conservative, but he stands up, and what he says, regardless of how he does it, he says, things are fine as they are. And he goes through certain cliches or certain ideas. I don't mean to attack the fine members sitting on the right of the aisle. But he may say things like, well, if it's not broke, why should we try and make some change in it? It's going well enough now. We can't handle all we have. Why make some drastic change because we have still not worked out the finer points of the bill we passed last year regarding national health? I say, let's leave it as it is. So you could look right there and say, all right, if it was a House of Commons, you could say MP so-and-so, the first guy that spoke, he represents C-Force. He represents the Common Force. He represents the desire to change. And the man who just spoke represents the kind of resistance. Like, no, let's not. And then if nothing else, and I'll go through all this just to make you again see that your ordinary nervous system, ordinary intelligence can get some grasp of that, then I could say, all right, even here, there are people who have no interest, sitting here, members of Parliament, that have no interest in this bill. None whatsoever. They may end up vote because somebody bought them a beer. They just got no interest in it. They're independent, to use the political thing. So I could say, and they for a second would go, well, yeah, you're right. And so you can say, all right, there is C-Force, there is the desire, there is the push to change, and over here the other man who spoke represents. He is a viable example of the desire. No. It's always you people over there, all you, the Progressive Party, the Liberal Party, you guys, all you want to do every year is pass more and more bills. We've got more bills than we can even enforce. We've got more laws than we can even finance. Let's just leave this one alone. So you can say, all right, there is somebody attempting to protect the status quo who's saying, come on, just change for the sake of change is nothing. There's too much change. Let's slow down. But then look around. There are other people napping. Members of Parliament. There is your E-Force. And for a split second, even ordinary intelligence will go, well, all right. But it wouldn't mean anything. But back to where I said we were back starting off, but I lied. Now we're starting off. Keeping all of that in mind, then consider the second force. But also remember it can all change, because then, the so-called conservative, the so-called D-Force, then comes their turn, and they can stand up and they propose a new piece of legislation. And so now they are after change. That's why I want you to understand it's all ad hoc. It's just out in the world as surveyed by ordinary intelligence that it insists that A must remain A, even if it doesn't. And people know it doesn't, but they insist because you've got to have A being A, you've got to have 2 and 2 equal 4, And if you are wired up to be a conservative, if we're speaking politically, then you have got to believe that the head of the Republican Party, or if you're in Europe, the head of the Social Democrats, or the head of the Labor Party, that they will remain conservative. That one day that the head of the Conservative Party is not going to stand up and say, all right, here's what I want to do. I want to increase taxes by 300%, and I want to take all the land and property away from the corporations, and I want to give it to the poor people. You know that's not going to happen any more than 2 and 2 is not going to be 5 tomorrow. But do understand that for a second, even you can understand, you can see it from your ordinary level, that it's not in some theoretical, philosophical way what I say. It is a fact that it shifts. But the mind says it does not shift, that it must call 2 and 2 4. It must have some, regardless of how questionable it is, some apparent reason for believing in the continuation that one name represents something, that one thought represents something. But always remember, they are ad hoc. That's what the whole point of that, they're not 3 forces that are just, that over here you could identify some force in the universe or in some other universe that says, I am the force in charge of change. It could be. All you got to do is turn around and look back, and there's some other force of change from another direction, especially from another dimension, and this one resists it. Which is why you can't have any faith in supernatural forces. Any of you who still have any. So now back. Now we'll get going, by God. Now to the new name of second force that I was suggesting. Are we having trouble? No. Right here in Fargo City? No. Well, do not bring out 76 trombones. I'll handle it myself. Instead of calling it resisting force or the force in charge of protecting the status quo, we were calling it, or I was suggesting that we referred to it as the, what do you want? Or the uninvited. Right, some of you may think you can already, and you can probably, already run along with some of that in your own brain. But consider, I was going to point out something very specific about it, because those of you who can already see some of this and have heard some of this, me calling it for the time being the what do you want, we could almost let go, and you might think, well, it was just a shot for a cheap laugh, or to make me giggle, and it's just something new to call it. But there's a little more. A little more. Why else would I make such a hand gesture if there wasn't a little more? Of course, I could have palsy. Do people still have palsy? They changed the name of it, didn't it? Something that sounded better? Like upper limb gout? No. Specifically, in line of considering that we might call this the get out of here force, I was going to ask you to consider this. About how in the ordinary world men experience and display a explosive, a near totally unreasonable anger toward unexpected guests, even family and friends. Don't let me have overdone saying explosive and near unreasonable. It's not necessarily that if you're trying to think of yourself or your life experience that people actually become ballistic and turn into hand grenades just because they're sitting there. But just imagine yourself. And then imagine on a wide range the way the nervous systems and the nexus of ordinary life are arranged, in the civilized world especially. That you are, as far as you know, uninvolved with any immediate expectations. You're expecting no one, you have invited no one, and those of you who are really getting good, your family and friends, can also be seen as your thoughts and feelings. And this could be going on that your living room is where it should be, and your brain. But there you sit, and whatever it is you're doing, just noshing off to yourself, dozing, watching TV, reading important philosophical works. And I'm talking about totally unexpected, and people, whether they overtly blow up, there is a continual, very common reaction in the human nervous system from any civilized view, a damn near totally unreasonable, I call it anger. How about just some irritation? But it's very common just to be anger, and people may try to hold it down. You go to the door and it's your mother. And you got this look, and it takes you a couple of seconds and you're still not all that happy. And I'm assuming that you don't have any problem with your mother. Or it's one of your best friends. But you were sitting there doing whatever it was. That as far as you were concerned, this was your time. Nothing was going on, and what do you want? To your own family and friends. That is what is apparently your own close energy that seems to run your feelings and emotions and thoughts. You could ask, if you get a glimpse of that, I'm not going to stop and try to prove it, since I think I have proven to your satisfaction, since I showed you last time that you can't prove anything worthwhile. You can only take note of it. But anyway, I'm not going to try to prove this happens. You either have some awareness of what I'm talking about or you do not, of the uninvited guest. But if you get a feel of it, then you could ask yourself a kind of question and say, who is it in the routinely civilized populace that looks forward to the unexpected? Who, if you pushed it a little bit further, who in the ordinary world, in the city, would look forward to having to entertain? To entertain uninvited, unexpected guests. Because still assuming you're civilized, and you open the door and it's your mother, it's your best friend. Yeah, still assuming you're civilized, and you can smile without having your, if Henry was here, he could tell me that, without your eye muscles smiling. But you go, oh, hi. Oh, it's you, come in. So we'll assume that you're civilized enough, that you do the kind of things that civilized people do. Hi, come in. Sure good it's an unexpected surprise to see you here tonight, this time of night. Come on in. So the point being that you are, to some degree, going to play civilized host. That is, you are going to entertain them. At least enough you entertain their presence. But you let them come in, and you finally say, would you like some coffee or something? Back to the question, who in the routinely civilized world of men looks forward to having to entertain, not just let in, not just, that's enough at that level. Just the day you sit, no one's been invited and you're not expecting anyone. That's enough. But then, assuming you're civilized, that you don't suddenly fall to the floor and try to hide, and hope they didn't see your shadow. Well, then you've already got this immediate kind of unreasonable, kind of negative reaction. But then, assuming you're civilized, you're going to head to the door, and if it turns out to be family or friends, then you must entertain them. Who? The question was, who in the routinely civilized world looks forward to having to entertain, not just let in, but having to entertain unexpected, uninvited visitors? Now, I said even family and friends, but how about this? Who looks forward to having to entertain unexpected, uninvited friends, especially if there's some kind of foreigners? They think funny. They act weird. Huh? It's like a variation of a play title, I think, one time. It's like, you say to the waiter, no thanks, no exotic ideas for us. We're human. Who in the world? It'd be bad enough for your family, your friends to show up. But what if it was... And then you go to the door, and still you're civilized, so you have to entertain them, and it's some foreigner, some exotic creature that acts weird, talks funny, has strange ideas. I mean, just not one of us. You being us. Well, who would look forward to that? There was one reality, I don't think Kyroots even ever noted, that their motto, and they had it on a banner in indelible ink, their motto was, who needs surprises? Well, I guess Kyroot never mentioned them because they've been gone a long time. When I say gone, I'm talking about serious goneness. Am I to assume that you people are not kin to the man who wrote to Kyroots saying that he was tired of all these metaphors? May I assume that you understand, I'm not talking about strangers of a different nationality or a different culture showing up at your door. You knew that. It's exotic, strange smelling, strange talking ideas. You can smell their breath and tell they're not eating local food. The energy running them didn't come from your grandmother's cooking. Oh, foreigners. Foreigners are bad for one's hormones. If you're old enough to be concerned about hormones. Because if you're ordinary and you're old enough to be concerned about hormones, you already don't like everybody anyway. Well, increasingly, and especially, you know, family and friends, you may still be able to tolerate, maybe with a couple of drinks in you. But foreigners? I mean, from somebody from another state or another country, forget it. Huh? Well, I don't know. When I was younger, I went to college, and I took some kind of course. They called it Comparing Religions or some crap. And we had somebody in class that wasn't one of us. They weren't a Methodist. I forget what they were. But it turned out I had coffee or talked to the guy once or twice, and he seemed all right. But, you know, that's when I was 18. I didn't understand. Because here I am now, whatever, fill in your age. You know what your age is. Here I am, 50, 60. Some of you, I hate to do it, 30 or something. And somebody knocks on the door, and now it's somebody that's a non-Methodist. Somebody that's a non-me. I ain't got time for that crap. I mean, let kids worry about speculating. We're talking about serious stuff now. Now I'm grown, I understand, hey, if you're not Albanian and Methodist and drive on the left-hand side of the road or wherever it is, I don't need that. You remember where we were. We're not talking about exchange students and world travel. You remember we were talking about number 2 force that we were naming. What do you want? That is not part of life. It is not normally discussed. Oh, it's talked about, but it's not discussed because who's going to discuss a bad surprise? I mean, pick out the finest, most sophisticated college or university institution of any kind on this planet and look under their curriculum in the syllabus somewhere and try to find some course that in some way, I don't know how, I don't even know whether I can stand here and make this one up, that in some way the course, I don't know what the name would be, but that the course description is something about that we will impersonally discuss stuff that you don't like. Or maybe it should be, and then dash, we mean that you really don't like. You're not going to find that, I'm sorry, in case you ever look. Because even if somebody thought, let's do that course, they can't find anybody to teach it. They'll find some people that say, well, yeah, I might like to teach that. And everybody else say, well, no, I wouldn't teach a course like that. So there you are. You understand or not? I was afraid not. In other words, half the reservoir, half the e-pool of potential teachers of that course would want to teach it, and half would not. And see, if you're ordinary, you say, well. And of course, if you're not ordinary, I say, well. So you understand, nobody could teach it, because half of them say, yeah, I'd love to teach a course like that. What a challenge, or whatever they'd say. You know, how much does it pay? But then half the other people that could teach it will go, well, that's the crappiest sounding course. That doesn't even make sense. You know, count me out. I wouldn't teach that. So you can say, well, we're in good shape now. No, we're not. Nobody's fit to teach it. Not if you just got two possible pools, and half of them say, yes, I'll teach it, I'd love to, and half of them say, not me. You can say, well, we're in business. No, we're not. Oh, if you're in the city, yeah, you're in business. But you're not in business. Not unless you had a full love of stick shifts. I know what you're doing. You're going to try and fool around with working for Mr. Transmission. The attitude, back where we were, the attitude in life that people do not discuss, what I was trying to get you to see, is me calling one of the forces, one of the three reservoirs, one of the three outlets of energy, one of the three guides that run everything. All kinds of descriptions are everywhere. But one of the three pillars, forces and guides strike people's intelligence first off. The three possible energies, one of them. And remember, it's not stable. It's just a potential, it's a force. And it's not always wearing the same clothes and the same name. But this one, this particular outlet, when you see it in life, and it just spots around from person to person. It doesn't have to be a whole group in unison at one time identifying the second force as this or that. But the point is, constantly, the second force is being identified, is being felt and experienced by people as, what do you want? In other words, it's an annoyance. It's an irritation, to put it kindly. Many times it's like, I just can't stand it. And what are they talking about? Oh, they'll tell you they're talking about something. Well, I'm talking about people showing up at my house in the middle of the night. I'm talking about being in debt. I'm talking about, whatever it is they get excited about. That doesn't matter. You've got to understand that 1/3 of the forces that drive a three-dimensional reality strikes people at any given time. If that seemed to be the king of the mountain holding their attention, would be that force at any particular time, the feeling of that force right then, if they single that one out, is, what do you want? It's like, leave me alone. And of course, it can't leave you alone unless you won't die. None of them can. But notice that that is the clear description of it. But who discusses it? Nobody. Not because they're at fault. But if I tried to get ordinary intelligence and succeeded for a second, an ordinary man to hear some of this, or to see in the general way in which I'm pointing, and he saw it, then he would understand that it can't be talked about. It's bitching. It's whining. It's complaining. Now, you can say rhetorically, or you can say linguistically, or you can say logically that, yes, you can describe your complaints. And what's a priest for? What's a psychiatrist? What's much of conversation about? But you cannot really note it. That's why I was bringing up, if you missed the point, that there would be no such course as that. Because I can describe it, and you say, well, yeah, you could. You could not only have a course, you could yourself think, well, I'm going to undertake my own objective observation and study of the fact that much of people's life, much of each individual's attitude toward his life is one of kind of annoyance. And it's not of any particular thing, or it's not of something that is commonly held to be annoying. That one man here finds something annoying that his neighbor, his friends, his family they might enjoy it. Or they might at least be indifferent to it. That is worth study. They can say that, but does anybody do it? That means no. I don't know why, but that means no, they don't. Well, of course, they don't do them with any. But this one, you would think, because I can describe it, it's the feeling of some 1/3 of life, more or less, is this force, this reservoir of energy, that if people have to think about it, if they do put words on it, if their attention for the ad hoc purpose of their own instant consciousness lights on this, or vice versa, their feeling is, what do you want? How can you discuss that? How could you study it? How could you, it can't even be proven that that's what it is. All you can do is take some note of it. Jesus. All right, we got 10 minutes. We're going to the third one. We'll keep this up. Now, what's this, June? We'll be finished by then. All right, the third force of us trying to rename them, of calling this one, remember, reservoir, potential source of energy that's there, and it's just whether you're noticing. At any given time, you're bitching, whining, complaining, or being excited, and it's all a matter of the balance, the existence of three forces. So the third one connotating no sequential stature of quality or importance, but the third one. Since we've already talked about, then I got to call this one the third one, which I was going to petition this honorable court to let us call it, for functional temporary reasons, call it the, hey, get out of here. This, at first sound, again, let me speak as though we had an ordinary man's attention, or we had your ordinary attention. You can listen simultaneously. An ordinary man's perception of this, the sound of it at first, would be finally, no matter that I called it a force or that gods were metaphorical, crude descriptions of, such as this. But this would be the one that would sound at first to just be totally unnecessary. Inasmuch as, even if an ordinary intelligence had followed some of this for the last few nights or hours or minutes, inasmuch as polarized, binary, dichotomous, dual divisions in forms of energy, of ideas, of thoughts, of feelings, of morals, even of scientific realities, would seem to be all that is required to support a universe of three dimensions. And so to even talk, regardless of the fact, as I said, that you could get a person to take maybe my example of Parliament and a conservative and a liberal and them arguing, and then everybody else in this particular issue, over that one particular issue, anybody else there in the chambers, in the House, that just wasn't interested. That I could get them to see, all right, there are, all right, you can say there's three forces. But then again, once you get past one little example here and there, to actually speak as though that there was a third force, a third possibility, and I'm saying possibility, it's always in action, but a third possibility that is beyond a person's immediate perception of what's going on, of there being forces of push and pull, forces trying to change things and forces trying to hold on to the present situation, and to say, well, all right, there's always a third possibility. There's always a third force. There's always a third reality, a third aspect going on. Beyond any immediate example that I might get them to go, oh yeah. But beyond that, when you just hear it presented as some sort of blanket universal constant or law, it just sounds, if you hear that, if somebody insists it's true, you say, all right, but it sounds just so unnecessary. I mean, if it's true, what's the hell's the use of it? If they were moralistic, if they were ordinary, then all right, you've got God and what's his name? Started to say the Prime Minister. Satan. God and anti-gods. Who else do you need? I mean, if life is the struggle between good and evil, you've got God and the anti-God. If life is a moral test, then you've got the possibility of living goodly or badly. What else is there? It doesn't show necessarily some narrow-mindedness having to do with one's social behavior. It would just seem that, at least in that area, that if you are interested and tied up to be reactive to the ideas and questions of morality, then what else is there? You either behave correctly, by whatever standard it seems to be, you either behave correctly or incorrectly. And if there is anything else, it's irrelevant. It's unnecessary. This is it. Or if we're talking about scientific truths, then, all right, something is either true. A law is true. A theorem has been proven. A law is now accepted in our community, in the scientific discipline. So it's either true or it's not true. What else is there? If there is something else that's irrelevant to this, if you say that the third law of thermodynamics, and you state it, and you say, all right, that's the law. That's what we accept it is. So it's either true or not true. Now, I don't know whether you're in our profession. What do you say? Do you see? It has nothing to do. You don't have to be moral. That's why I went from morality to science. It's not in some way that people who live by morality or people who are hard-shell conservative Baptists, people that seem to have a very strict view of good and evil, it's not that they're in some way dumb, because they're in the same position as a scientist who may say, I'm an atheist, or worse yet, I'm an Anglican, or I don't know. He just says, I'm an atheist. But he's in the same position. He says, I am a mathematician, or I'm a scientist. It has to, if you say, well, scientific reality, what do you need besides a binary, a dichotomous, a polarized approach? And he would say nothing. In fact, if there is anything else, it's irrelevant to what I'm doing. That's the same way as it would be, as far afield as it may seem at first, two senses of morality. The point being, if there is, to ordinary mind, to ordinary intelligence, if there is a continuing third force somewhere, a third potential outlet for energy, if it is, it strikes the ordinary mind as being, well, it's unnecessary. If it is there, it's just, who needs it? Because all it takes is peanut butter and jelly. In some combination, all it takes is either true or false. All it takes is either right or wrong, good or evil, whatever it is. That covers it. And it doesn't matter what the area is. You're talking about the full spectrum of the secondary world from any ordinary view. So it would strike, the first sound of this, the ordinary mind, is it's unnecessary. If you could, for some reason, somehow, make the ordinary mind see that there is always, it's not theory, it's not question, that there is, whether I call it a force for the time being in an ad hoc way, or whether I call it a potential outlet, or whether I call it an active outlet, or whether I call it a reservoir of energy, it doesn't matter what it is. If they saw, whatever their field is, if they were scientists and they see true and false, or if they were moralists and they saw good and evil, whatever it is, if I made them suddenly see that there's a third one, what the hell good would it do them? Not only is it be unnecessary, but if I made them see it for a second, would you like to consider what kind of effect it would have? Now, you can't do it, but I'm telling you for a reason, for your own reason, because you couldn't do it, and so this is not to bring up some speculation of thinking, boy, wouldn't that be fun to get some ordinary person in some way, torture them and make them see it all. But what I was going to say, if they did somehow see it, what they would see still is they would either see it as being irrelevant to the ordinary existence of ordinary life, for their life, whether they be a scientist or a priest or a rabbi. If we're talking about morals, if we're talking about social behavior, if we're talking about the soft social sciences, if we're talking about the hard physical sciences, if you made them see the third one, that for somehow they could see it right then, it would strike them as being irrelevant, truly irrelevant, that it doesn't enter into it, and are frightening beyond any ordinary call of the duty of a human. Now, I said something like that a little earlier, and some of you looked a little quizzical. What I was trying to get to is to tie this into the time segments, again, the past, present, and future. And we can't do it, we're out of tape, but may I suggest what I was going to try to get you to look sort of towards eventually, sometime, probably the rate we're going around October. When I said frightening, because I assume all of you it's fairly easy to see if you're following what I'm saying, that if you could get the ordinary mind to see this for a second, then it would see whatever this third reservoir is being kind of irrelevant. Like, if there is one, and if I do, well, you're right, it's there, but it's irrelevant, whatever the hell it is, because all I'm dealing with is a theorem. An idea is either true or false. I'm a scientist, or I'm a moralist, and either something is good and proper and civilizing and uplifting, or it's degrading, it's immoral, and blah, blah, blah. And so whatever that is, it's irrelevant. So we'll assume that you can get a glimpse of that intellectually. It's either and are extremely frightening that it calls for a person to be frightened beyond any ordinary call of duty, beyond any expectation of being frightened, if an ordinary person can be made to see that. Which I guess is a good place to leave, looking upon your kind North Dakotian faces and seeing the great look of, what? Is that not a good way to go out? How? No. What? You may fade out now. That was